Good morning. Hello, everybody. Hi, Colleen.
Hello.
Hi, Danny.
Hi, everybody.
And welcome to our live group and all of you that are listening later. I was telling our live group that we just got back from the annual International Reiki Retreat in Sedona. Got back yesterday afternoon. Colleen and I did, and that went really well. It was lovely as always. And then, of course, it's always good to be home. So, Colleen, you're still unmuted. I didn't know if you wanted to say anything.
To add to that,
Yeah.
just that, the Sedona is so beautiful in such a different way. And, we always talk about color with Reiki and how Reiki and color is actually a vibration. It's actually a frequency as much as it is what we see visually. It has an energy to it. And the colors in Sedona are, it's just red, and the greens are sage greens, and it's, desert flowers, and um, the seeing the distance, everything at a distance, the red rocks are just massive. And so it's these beautiful, feels like Wild West, like I'm out in the Wild West. Well, it is actually still a bit. So, um, anyway, for me, because here in Oregon, one of the things I love is how much color we live in. Everything is really green. And so it's green and it's blue, and the greens are a yellow green or a deep olive green. And so different shades of green than in Sedona. And so when we go to Sedona, just being really enveloped by that red and those sage greens and the blues of the sky, the sunsets are always beautiful. Um, it's really, for me, that's one of my main attractions with going to the retreat is being in the color and getting to just bathe in that frequency. And then, as you know, we've been talking so much about extraordinary reality and how you can activate Reiki. For me, I use the distance symbol and activate my heart light so that I can move and entrain my energy into that next level of frequency. And what it does is it opens extraordinary reality, and my perceptions expand into a higher sense. And everything just comes alive. And that is as true in nature as it is in a city, or in a city as much as it is in nature. So it's really where you are in your home, every place that you are, you can expand into that. So when I'm in Sedona, um, activating that extraordinary reality intentionally and being in a whole group of people, a divinely ordered circle of people, we had both online and in person, in that same elevating into those frequencies, and then being in the color and the just vastness, ancient energy of the stones, like really hearing the wisdom of the stones. And then the juniper trees on the Mago Retreat Center. And right now I'm very, very engaged with the spirit of trees and walking through and, really noticing their aliveness and their spirit within them. And so when you activate that Honchazate, that distance symbol, when you activate it, that's when we do the invocations and the Reiki journeys here, and we talk about breathing in that divine heart, and the light of the divine heart shines through you, and your heart light shines in front of you and behind you, and your heart light shines on each side of you and above you and below you. And that is shining your divine heart, and the first thing that sees it is you. So it shines it so your perceptions entrain into that energy, into that frequency. And so the frequency that exists around you that is like that, actually the Reiki energy will help you lift and entrain to those higher frequencies. It actually activates it within you, and the external source of the energy, that life force, just starts showing up all around you. And again, that is anywhere you are. You can be in the space you're in right now, and you can be in a small space, you can be in your car, you can be in, nature, you can be in the city. So back to Sedona. Bathing in that color and really activating that heart light, um, and being in the extraordinary reality of the stones there, because they just carry ancient wisdom. And they talk about vortexes all around Sedona, but really the whole place is a vortex, the whole energy of it, because of just the ancientness of the stones carrying wisdom. We've been doing a lot of that in here in the journeys and in our invocations, is really like actually inviting the wisdom of the stones. I mean, this is so far beyond our lifetime that, you think of the ancient wisdom they carry. And so inviting that in. So it actually leads us to our topic today. We are moving into a whole month about intuition. And even if you're already really skilled in intuition, I would say I'm pretty skilled in it. Um, there's always more to know and to experience. What I mean by skilled with my intuition is that it is something that I have actively pursued, remembering through my inner knowing, my authentic intellect, what is my intuition and how does it work, and how do I get better at it, and how do I know more about it? Because so often some people think, oh, they're naturally more intuitive than I am, so I may not, I just don't really have a lot of it. But mainly what we see, Robyn and I teach this, for years, and what we see with it is just simply not knowing what it is for you and how you access it. And there's the key, because Reiki is what accesses or helps you access and entrain to your intuition. And so once you start doing that, you start to understand how it works for you. So Robyn's going to go through a whole thing about it and what your intuition is, and then we'll do a journey after that. So it's a good subject. We teach a lot of it, so sometimes I have to actually go back and look and see if we just recently covered this. Um, and then I didn't really find it. But I feel like we talk about it all the time. So here we go, because I think it's one of the main things your inner awareness is calling you to do, is to remember your intuition, your inner guidance. It's so all encompassing. So, Robyn.
Yes. Okay. Welcome to those of you that are new here. I know we met quite a few people that were at the retreat that said they were going to join. So just as those that are new, we do have how we structure this is that we talk about things, we do a guided journey or meditation, depending on how it comes out that day. And then we go into breakout rooms with each other to give and receive Reiki. It's very casual, so you're welcome to come late, leave early. Lots of people join us from work, things like that. But I kind of wanted to piggyback off of what Colleen was saying, because we will be doing a whole month of this. And for those of you that might be even new to Reiki, maybe this is some of the first kind of experiences that you've had with talking about these subjects. And you might be like, what is she talking about? Um, just know that what some of those things are as well, um, is your intuition developing. Because when we think of intuition, all we think about, or I would say that a lot of what the word is used in like the common nomenclature is that, oh, that intuitive sense of, "Oh, I'm sensing danger, or I need my intuition to make a decision. And so what's my intuition telling me?" So those kinds of topics of like in our everyday kind of walking, waking life. And it is that too. So developing that inner voice, developing, understanding how your intuition talks to you, things like that, is also a part of what we mean when we mean intuition. However, intuition is also the way that we perceive things when we perceive them in like a Reiki attunement, or maybe even a Reiki session, or as a Reiki practitioner. Intuition is what we might feel in other types of work that we do. So if we have downloads that come through, if we have aha moments that come through, when we refer to intuition, we're talking about all of that as an all encompassing aspect. So, like in our next step Reiki classes, such a big part of that is what we talked about last month, Reiki and shamanism. It's, we have our the Reiki lens to that, but we are learning a lot of those same skills. But we also are really talking about developing those things within you, remembering them, lifting the layers of where we might have gotten blocked to them. So when we are in these Reiki guided journeys, how you perceive that is also what we're talking about with our intuition. And some of us have that very natural aptitude towards it. So it's very easy for us to tap into it. For others of us, it is a development and a developed skill. And, I know for me, and I talk about this all the time, I know, but for me, because this is kind of how Colleen is, right? Of what she was just talking about. Um, I always thought that I wasn't intuitive because how things come to me are very different. Um, and I'm in my left brain a lot, right? And depending on your life, you can be in your left brain a lot. So I'm here this morning. I'm like, well, I've had to, get lunches made. I've had to at the retreat, and she was working as well, but I had to help with the sound and the online portion and all of these things that keep can also keep me in my left brain quite a bit. So some of those things might be a little harder for me to think, oh, I am also intuitive. Um, However, I have, after years of development and understanding of it, I do know that I have intuition. And in my life, I have connected into it on a deeper and deeper level the more that I have worked towards my skill with it. And my also my journeys now, I have really can have really grandiose experiences, also because I know how my intuition works, how that style works for me, which is different than Colleen, my clairsense, which is different than Colleen. And I know that Reiki has helped me with that. It has healed the layers that brought me into my forgetting. It has healed the layers that have made me be in my comparison, the culturally created self that thought, oh gosh, if my experience isn't exactly like that, that means that it must not be true for me. And then really empowered the ways that it comes through for me, the way that my intuition does work for me, which Colleen is clairvoyant, so she sees her intuition. And even as I'm like saying this, I was thinking this, Colleen, of like, so you're really able to connect into that extraordinary reality, which is also a skill in knowing how to do it with that heart light. But you do see the faces, right? Um, and and that is a clairvoyance. You're seeing those faces. For me, that's a little bit of a harder thing to connect into. It doesn't mean that I'm not um feeling it. It's not that I don't have that ability. I do have that ability. But for me, I might go into seeing the layers of the red and seeing the rocks and thinking about the eons of time, right? And going even maybe through like the tree of life in a more uh, Darwin idea of it, where I'm feeling into those eons of time because I can see the layers and I can think about, oh, holy cow, those rocks, the amount of time those rocks have seen. And another person might feel the ground underneath them, and it can really go into this very embodied state of, wow, I'm really connected into the land, and that's how they're connecting into the land. Or somebody else might hear the sounds around them, the sounds of the wind and that sage green, the sound of the birds or the lizards or things around them, and that's connecting them into the land. So there's all of these different ways in which our intuition can connect us into those places. Even if we're activating the distance symbol, we might not have the same exact way that we're connecting into that extraordinary reality, because all of this works differently for each of us. And that's what we're really going to be talking about this month, because it's such an important subject for us as people, for us as teachers, because in our own experience, as personal, in our personal life with this, we see how different we are in this way. Um, and we see how each of our training has developed what we each have developed. And so it really is such a big part of our message around it, because everybody has these abilities within them, and they can develop them even if it's different than how we talk about it. And another person is going to have the same, a very similar experience to what Colleen described, and that comes easy to them. Or, with a little bit of development, they can tap into that. And then somebody else might, be more about how I said it and all of the different examples that I said it. Um, and Reiki helps us with this. This is something that can open up on day one of level one, or even in a Reiki session, or even the word Reiki. It opens up, it starts opening up for them, even hearing the word Reiki and saying yes to some sort of Reiki experience, whether that's just going to a class. We had multiple people at the retreat this weekend that hadn't even had a Reiki session before. They just heard the word Reiki. They saw the retreat in Sedona, and they decided to say yes and go. And that is intuition working. They're not sure maybe exactly what that all means for them yet, but that even there is your intuition working, and Reiki opening it up within you and calling you to it, already before you might have even had an experience. Many people in level one of day one, first experience or attunement, might have an experience of seeing colors, or maybe not seeing but experiencing colors. You hear that a lot, that, oh, I had an experience of indigo, is a very, or I'm sorry, violet is a very common one, and that's the color of the crown chakra, right? And a lot of times it's like, to us, it's that opening of that crown chakra, for people. And so you see that right away. And so on the other side of why we're so passionate about this subject, is because it starts happening for people. And what do you do with that? And how do you develop that? And how do you understand it more? And so as teachers, um, that's why. And I really believe so much that, as being one of these people of like, oh no, I'm not intuitive. I don't have that for me. And that I am now fully believe that I am. And I believe that everybody is, and that everybody has these abilities within them. So, when we're talking about intuition over this whole month, we will be talking about all of the different aspects of it, whether that's in your waking life, because that's there too, whether that is in like your Reiki sessions as a practitioner, whether you're professional or not as a practitioner. And then for you in your own either self Reiki or meditation, other practices that you might have, or in your journeys, because we do journeys here every week as well, and how that all works for you. So, when we're talking about intuition today is more of like an overview with it. Um, we, Colleen, do we have us going deeper into the clairsenses this month, or are we going deeper into it now?
Even today, the journey is going to be about actually noticing how you perceive the journey as you
Okay.
go through the journey.
Will we do another week where we go deeper into each of the clairsenses, or should I go into that now?
Oh, that's a good idea.
Yeah, I think that that would be
Yeah,
helpful.
we'll do that.
Yeah, to go over it so that there's like an because we talk about it a lot
Yeah, I think
um
that's a really good idea.
throughout. Um so I'm gonna just go over them. Let me see. I'm gonna share screen.
I'll add that to next week.
Okay. So when I'm talking about how we perceive them differently, what I'm talking about, and you may have heard this term, is I'm talking about our clair senses. So for those of you that are just listening, if you go to ReikiLifestyle.com, you go to our resources tab and you go to free downloads, we have in there a document that is the clair senses. And what this is a document that um, briefly overviews the different kinds of the clairsenses. And you can, it's just like a paragraph for each one. So it's not very much. There's a lot of information around about the clairsenses. So I'm going to go ahead and just talk about them, and then we'll continue to talk about them. And even the journey does it today. So we have clairvoyance, which is clear seeing. So that is that yours comes in pictures, but a lot of times that's not completely literal. A lot of times that is actually even metaphorical, and so you have to kind of understand what those pictures mean. We have clairaudience, which is clear hearing. So you might hear words. And in all of these, you might not actually hear a whisper of the word. You might instead have a knowing of the word that is, it's not an actual sound. It is an understanding of the word as well, of the words. Claircognizance is clear knowing. That is where you're not necessarily seeing it, but you just know. So it's like kind of in your mind's eye. And clear thinking is thinking your like journey style, thinking your intuition. Clear empathy is like emotion, but feeling those emotions. So, many of us are empathic that are called to these things, but it's also you're going to feel like, let's say if you're doing a journey and you go to the river of life, because we go there so often, that's the easiest one to reference. The things that you're releasing are going to be felt in your body. You might feel emotions around that. Clairsentience is clear physical feeling. So in this case, it's like, you might have a sensation in your arm if somebody has a broken arm and you are giving them Reiki for that. Clairtangency is clear touching. So you touch something or a person and you have intuitive hits that come up. Clairsalience is clear smelling. So that one's pretty straightforward. And clairgustance is clear tasting. So these are the clair senses. There's a lot to each one. And again, they can be metaphorical. Like with the clair audience, it can be an understanding that there's words being spoken, but you don't actually hear anything. So that can be the case with any of these as well. And then you can have a multitude of them. There can be a mix. One might be stronger than another. Um, uh, but like you might have multiple of them. For me, when I'm in my journey style, I have claircognizance and clair intellect, sometimes empathy. Um, but one in my waking life is clairsalience. And I would say that clairsalience and clairgustance are ones that are kind of more these peripheral, where you might have them, but it's not your only clair sense. But in my waking life, I have clear smelling. I definitely have smelt multiple things that have stopped, kind of disasters from happening. And so more than it, and it's more than just like, oh, I mean, I do have a good nose, but it's more than just that. So that's just an introduction to the clair senses. If you're here live, you can see that we put a link to the chat, and if you're listening later, we will have it in the show notes as well. So, the other thing that is a part of intuition is that understanding on whether if it's intuition or something else. Um, and as somebody who is a clear intellect, which is clear thinking, and a clear cognizance, which is clear knowing, I would say the thinking is it's one of those that I can, I've because of these gifts, I'm also can be an overthinker, a worrier. I've had anxiety for a lot of my life, which I don't really have anymore because of this work. Um, but this is just using this one as an example. How do you know when it's that versus your intuition? And my answer to that is that I can really feel it in my body when I'm in, like the fear state or the intuitive state. Also, for clear empathy, your clear emotion, that's another one where you really have to work on the development of what's mine and what's theirs, because you can tend to take it on and absorb rather than observe. So we always say that observe rather than absorb. So that's another piece of this development, right? Like that we have to learn how to discern our intuition in our waking life, but also in my journey experiences as well, or my Reiki experiences as well. So there's a lot of different ways that our intuition really can develop. And if you, are trying to take more of a deep dive into this. This is like Colleen said, and we feel like we talk about it all the time. Have we done this month recently? Because we do it, because that's part of our passion is really trying to help people to develop it. Or if you have really strong intuition all the time where it almost feels like a burden, how do you manage that? Which is also a skill that you can develop. Um, and it's not about cutting it off, or which a lot of people do because things can be so painful, especially if you were highly sensitive in your childhood. Um, we see this all the time. We're in this process of remembering because that, because our experiences in our, earlier life have maybe it's like this level of protection for ourselves. And so, however it happened for you, whether you just thought you weren't intuitive, or you were highly intuitive or highly empathic, and you needed to go into that protection of yourself. Both things are a part of this process of learning how to hear it, develop it, or manage it in a way that it doesn't affect your kind of waking life or make you afraid to dive deeper into it because it can be too much, feeling things like that. So, what does intuition feel like in your sessions? Again, even with Reiki, if you're thinking like, oh, all of these other things I'm not really sure about, but let's say in your Reiki sessions or your first Reiki session or in your Reiki 1 and 2 class, you might have started to feel warmth in your hands. You might have felt that Reiki flowing. Maybe even for some reason you had some sort of psychic impression, or you went into a very calm certainty. Maybe your hands got really cold. Even those small little things is Reiki waking up your intuition. And I say small little things, they're not necessarily small little things. Sometimes those things can be, really life changing for people. Maybe even it's one word or one sentence for people. Sometimes that can be life changing for them. Maybe you might feel the change in your hands, like BOs and scanning, right? The sick line scanning, you might feel normal, but then when you get to a place, you have that impression of either the sensation in your hands change. So you might have a tingling or a hot or a cold, or for me, like my hands tend to just stop in a place, and that tells me they might need additional Reiki there or more focus in that area. Um, but it wasn't like that somewhere else. So let's say I'm working on their head and it feels fine, but then I get to, and I know this isn't a foundational hand position, but I like to work on the knees. Right. So then I maybe get to the knees and all of a sudden the sensation in my hands change. That happens for me, even though I'm not really like a clairtangency where I feel physically feel the things, but that happens for a lot of people. And that is intuition. And that is Reiki opening our intuition and bringing us on this journey again that our bodies are energetic beings. We have this Schumann resonance. We can feel the Schumann resonance of other people. The Reiki entrains that Schumann resonance up to the Reiki energy. And when there's a change in that, our bodies can sense it, even if how we actually perceive our kind of psychic impressions, our downloads, our intuition might be different than just what's happening in our hands. So that's how we know that it starts to turn. I say turn this on, but I do think it's inherent in everybody. So that's why you'll hear us say this process of remembering for us. And in some cultures, they don't go into that forgetting, right? It's a part of it with the children to continue to be in that remembering because so many of us have it when we're little. Um, and so there are cultures that they don't have that, but in this culture, generally speaking, at these ages, we have we've generally we've kind of been taught how to forget it. Um, or to not tap into it if you are have that fairly big natural aptitude towards empathy or towards psychic impressions or maybe even seeing through the veil, maybe your parents or just peer group or things like that kind of had you uh suppress it in a way. um so because of that, and I will say too that the younger generations that is starting to change. You see in my daughter's age and maybe in Gen Z a bit where they might have been raised in this culture to not go into their forgetting. I try that as much as possible with Luna. That I try to help her to be in her remembering with who she, is and that authentic self with it. And so you are seeing that more and more in this culture. So again, we'll be continuing and the journeys because really it's like we can say all these words that can be really helpful, but really a part of what can be so helpful is going into these journeys with intention of continuing this process for ourselves, learning more about intuition and what it means for each of us, what it means in general. Um, and so the journeys and learning from the Reiki energy, I would say, is kind of one of the most important parts of it because our words can say things, but really it's that direct connection to the energy and that connection that um, that helps us to learn maybe even the most around it all. So how do we access our intuition during Reiki energy? Um, how do we access our intuition in our waking life and how that looks different for each of us? Just giving that Sedona example. How to trust your intuition, how to be in your discernment around intuition. Again, that can be a process as well. Like I know for me, when I'm in my worry, when I'm in my intuition, and that takes a while in that discernment process, right? For some people, that's easier than others. And I love that. But for me, it was definitely a skill. That was a development that I had to let go of certain things but then really go into my own empowerment of my inner voice, go into my empowerment of my inner truth, go into my empowerment of when I say my voice, what I mean is kind of exactly where I started with this. Oh, I need to learn what this looks like for me, and how this works for me, separate from how I think that it should work. And that was such a big process of discernment, development, and the work that I did with Reiki energy about that process of letting go and really about that empowerment, shifting that of, okay, yes, we've had all this forgetting, but how do I empower me? How do I empower that inner truth? How do I empower my own voice so that I can hear me? So that's a really big piece of this process as well. Acting on intuitive hunches or noticing if we did have an intuitive hunch and we didn't act on it. I say this all the time of like that time when you're like, ah, I knew it and not acting on it. Um, that's still that's still validation, right? And that helps you grow in your confidence. And eventually you have enough of those experiences, you go, "Oh, I should have acted on it." And then eventually you do activate or act on it. I just had this like actually last week and I want to have time for the journey, so I'm not going to go into this story, but I just had this last week where I thought, it had to do with my nose and my sense of smell, and I was like, "Oh, why didn't I act on that? I should have thought about like, oh, that was an intuitive hit that I was getting, and I should have like investigated it more." So there we go. It still happens. It's a constant development. And validating yourself on those times when you're like, "Oh, I did know it," because eventually that gets to be where you act on it in the first place, rather than in retrospect. But the retrospect lessons are still important. So then also patience. It for some of us, it might turn on right away. For others of us, it might take a little while, and that's okay. We're all in our own divinely timed journey with it all. And for some people, it does take a couple of, maybe even a couple of years, honestly. Colleen and I talk about that within our own processes, that it took a little while. And some people, it's like they get it day one, it's like, oh, turned on, and I'm having these extraordinary experiences every time. So, really try to lean into the trust of this process of hearing, empowering, and learning more about your own intuition. Yeah. So Colleen brought up that intuition isn't necessary for Reiki to work, and I really appreciate that she
Yeah.
adds this to the conversation. The good thing about Reiki is that Reiki works regardless. So if we're doing it in a session, we don't have to have this as a part of our practice. Reiki is doing the work with our sessions. Reiki is doing the work with our self Reiki. This is only if you are interested in these subjects or if you have had experiences and you want to learn more about it.
Yeah, so if you think about how the history of Reiki, Yusui Sensei actually practiced a very intuitive style of Reiki. So he used Biosen scanning to determine where to place his hands. Then Dr. Hayashi used medical kind of standardized practices with his hand positions. So, everything was based on an ailment that somebody presented with and the organs that you would treat and the hand positions to treat those organs for that ailment. And then Mrs. Takata knew that her students were likely to not have the intuitive practice that Yusui had. They didn't have the medical knowledge and the uh, anatomy knowledge to practice the same way as Hayashi had. So her guidance from Reiki was to create the 14 foundation hand positions. Those are the ones that we typically learn with Reiki of placing your hands over your eyes and ears and top of head and, through the body. And for a while, it was thought that those were absolute. And then when the evidence-based history of Reiki was discovered in the late 1990s and early 2000s, it became known that Usui practiced a very intuitive style, which Mrs. Takata did too, but later in the years, it definitely got, like when I learned Reiki in 2000, we weren't supposed to use intuition. We were supposed to always and only follow the hand positions Mrs. Takata taught. Well, she really taught those so that anybody could practice Reiki. It wasn't dependent on your intuition, and it wasn't dependent on your medical knowledge or knowledge of anatomy. So really her intuition and her guidance to develop those standardized hand positions, the foundation treatment, that is what really opened up Reiki for anybody to be able to use it. The reason Robyn and I talk about this all the time is because what we see is Reiki actually activates your intuition, and there isn't a lot of actual training around it to develop skills with how to understand it, utilize it, and as she said, be able to hear yourself, and then however it applies in the rest of your life.